So we are back in front of you with our
What's up?
program supervisor, Jerry, and today he's going to tackle on of communication after the first couple of weeks that your loved one has been in treatment, to how to have some questions asked, how to answer some of those questions, and how to really have that dialogue with a newly sober person.
For sure. So usually we make a call, and it can be with the client in the room or not, depending on what the client wants. And we ask some specific questions. And one of the questions I usually ask is, how are the phone calls going that aren't instituted by us? When the client calls, are they still asking for financial help? Are they still angry with you if you don't give them what they need? Are they asking for material things? Because right now in treatment, they don't need a lot. They have food. They usually have clothing. They usually have a bed to sleep in. So their needs are minimal. And if they're calling you to ask for financials, I really recommend you speak to the case manager or myself, and we speak about that, because the phone calls about week 3 or 4 the dynamic should start to change, because case managers and me, the program manager, we talk to them about calling parents or family members or loved ones and asking them, just telling them, hey, I love you, thanks for the support, instead of asking for the needs. And that's the first thing I do on about week 3.
Right, and so typically, because the behavior is so deeply ingrained and conditioned of calling, I need, it takes weeks and weeks and weeks sometimes to really help with this awareness level to be able to call, to give, even if it's just emotional feedback.
That's right.
As opposed to take.
And so the next thing is, the parents will usually say or the family member, what their current expectation of progress in treatment is.
Okay.
And I try to tell them that when someone comes to rehab, the expectation of us fixing them or curing them of their disease is not going to happen. So it's a slow progress. And if they can understand that, they usually can go along with us for the entire time that the client stays here for their treatment progress. So usually about week 3, the client's starting to feel a little bit better. So some of the times when I speak to them, they're really starting to think, man, I don't have to stay here very much longer. And I tell them, how long has your addiction cycle been? They usually tell me, since I was 13, 14 years old. And I go, so you've had 9, 10, 11 years of addiction, and now after 3 weeks, you're feeling better. Of course, you're going to feel a little bit better because you're starting to eat well, you sleep, you're feeling more healthy, but there's so much to work on. I want the parents to know that we're not a cure-all for their addiction, but what we do is we give them the groundwork, we help them create a dynamic outside of treatment, and we give them a lot of hope. So when they leave here, if they continue on with their program, and I say that any kind of program that helps with their addiction, I see a high success rate of clients that do that. Now it's the clients that leave treatment and they go on and they think, now I'm cured, I'm good. I see a high relapse rate. And I have many clients that still call me that are still involved with some kind of 12-step or some kind of program where they're dealing with their addiction, that are being very successful in their life. And that was for me. Once I continued on with my work after I left treatment, I was successful. Before that, I was not. When I would just go home and I wouldn't do a program of any kind, it's too easy to get caught up in the rat race of life, and it's too easy for that to talk to your unreliable source to talk to, and it's easy to relapse.
One of the best analogies that I've heard over the years, especially coming from family that aren't involved in the addiction aspect, they're more of a support system, is I don't get it, how come they're not fixed? And so one aspect I've heard is it's picture it like diabetes, and I have to do that daily insulin injection, and I can, after a year of doing the daily injection, be, hey, it's great, I don't feel down anymore, I've got the system, I'm good to go, I'm gonna stop doing insulin. All of a sudden we go into insulin diabetic shock because the body's still not getting what it needs.
Exactly.
So same thing with the emotional and spiritual aspect. It's not the person's broken, it's just, hey, for some reason this body doesn't produce this, so we have to daily integrate it for that continual growth. And I've seen that a lot in the program too, of that spiritual and emotional, of talking, of even not daily, sometimes people will go a day or two without taking a vitamin, if you will, but then making sure that they're talking about it and staying ingrained. And those are the ones that we get great feedback of. They'll stop by a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later, in some cases 10 years later, to say, I just took my 10-year chip. Oh my gosh, it's great. I'm sponsoring here, doing this. It really comes down to creating a lifestyle around that part of the sobriety instead of the lifestyle and then sobriety fitting around that.
Yeah.
That's where we see a lot of people go sideways. So that's really good.
Exactly. And then the third thing I'll do is clients have a big expectation that they'll always be allowed to come home once they get well. And in their mind, well is 3, 4, a month and a half. And so I try to talk to the family member. The first thing is, are they allowed to come home? And it might not be for 6 months to a year, but we want to, make the expectation of the client reality and talk to them about that. I try to talk to clients. I really recommend 90 days of treatment, 9 months of sober living, because being fully accountable in treatment and then going home or going to your apartment, there's no accountability, and it's too easy to get picked off and relapse. So really, when parents tell me, oh yeah, they're allowed to come home, right when they finish treatment, I'm like, whoa, you want to be careful with that, because you're going back into the same emotional dynamic that had most of the addicts and alcoholics relapsing constantly, because they don't know how to deal emotionally with their family members.
Yeah, and I was just talking with actually a family member. There's a book by Bruce Lipton called The Biology of Belief, and he's out of, I want to say, Harvard. And it's incredible because he was one of the first people to actually recognize and notice environment is what shapes cells. He actually took a cell, split it in two so they're identical. He put one in a positive environment that was nurturing with actually healthy atmosphere, and one negative. The negative started mutating. The reason why I bring that up is because in environment sobriety, if I go back to the same environment where I was using high stress, all sorts of things, we go right back to that. Where If it's a new healthy environment with a high level of accountability, daily integration of step work and sponsors or mentors, and doing that, the environment is what shapes the person ultimately and keeps the sustaining. So the environment is huge. I'm a huge advocate of, is it a healthy environment moving forward?
And I agree, because it changes the spirit. And that's the one thing with addicts and alcoholics. Physically and mentally, you can get better by stopping the drug, but you can't change the spirit unless you're around exactly what you talked about. So you've got to change that to completely, get over the addiction. I don't know if you're ever over it, but you can put it at bay like I have. So that's one of the important things. So the last thing is, what is the expectation for the client and the family of visitation? Because a lot of times around the holidays, and they've just been using 3 weeks ago, heavy, they want to go home for the Christmas holiday. So there usually needs to be an expectation where the client just doesn't call the family and the family sends them a ticket and they go. You want to get the treatment center involved with this to explain kind of where the client's at the moment. Is going home, the emotional stress of that going to be harmful? Is that he or she ready for that? And it's a big deal. Sometimes a lot of people don't think about this, but the expectations of visitations to me is huge, because clients a lot of times want to go home and visit. Parents or grandparents might have a child that they're watching. They want to go visit the child, but in early recovery, there's so many things that are throwing clients off. You really have to work on that. So that's probably the last thing around week 3 I talk to the family about.
Okay, and yeah, that's really important of setting up and what that looks like. So what are some tips or advice that you can give of anyone seeing this that may be coming up on that, how to set these boundaries or to have that difficult conversation?
You want to make sure that you explain to the loved one how long they'll be able to be there. What is it going to be like for them? Where are they going to go? Because if they're around in their family neighborhood or their dynamic where they used, they shouldn't be going away from the family. They should be involved with the family, spend the time with the child, or wherever they're going back. So there needs to be some boundaries set up with the case manager and the client and the family member before they do that. Just don't send them a ticket and let them come home and expect everything's going to be fine because they've been sober for 3 to 4 weeks. That usually doesn't work out well in my experience doing this.
Yeah, and it seems about every month or month and a half there's a holiday popping up, right?
Yeah.
And so even just from a statistic standpoint, what have you seen boundaries that gives the highest statistic of success? And then on the flip side, the choices you see made that actually give the lowest statistic of staying sober.
What I see is high end is client returns home, you call the case manager where they're at right now and say, hey, they arrived, they're doing well, and maybe give a check-in call maybe every other day. Sometimes around the holidays, family gets really busy, but this is an important dynamic. Hey, they're still here. Not allowing them to use a car by themselves and take off and go do what they want.
I'm hearing first thing is scheduled communication,
yes.
So it's known up front. Second is transportation in groups as opposed to by themselves.
That's right. Mostly someone with them, and they might feel a little put out by that at first, but this is just to help them.
They tend to always,
yeah.
I should remove always. My experience has been more times than not, the person puts up some pushback, and how normal that is, and to actually expect pushback of, I'm used to getting it my way. And so how to navigate that and allowing them to push up and say, hey, I hear you and I feel you and I love you pushing back. I welcome you pushing back. This is the answer.
Yeah, and without the emotional entanglement that has happened in the past, so it's difficult. for that to be a positive dialogue, because the addict has 3 or 4 weeks sober. They think they're good. Why are you still thinking I'm going to do dishonest behavior? Well, because for 10 years you have been. And so a month doesn't fix that. So the client, if the family member is able to speak to them in a healthy way, even if the client gets a little perturbed, and just remain calm, or maybe get the case manager on the phone. The case manager can usually explain to the client, what's going on with this. Yeah. It's really, really helpful. The client needs to understand that there's going to be some boundaries before they return home, and once they return home, we're going to follow through the boundaries that are set up with the case manager. I see a high success rate. Where I don't see a high success rate is client comes up the day they're leaving. Hey, I got a ticket to go visit home. The client goes home. The family members, oh, we're good with it. He's been in treatment for 30, 45 days, whatever. He's good. He goes home. He gets home and says, hey, can I borrow the car? Sure. He's got 45 days sobriety. He takes off and goes to his friends, comes back loaded. And the family's all, what is going on with your treatment center? This guy came home for 1 day. Already after 1 day, he's using it. There wasn't any boundary set up. Unfortunately, this is a day-to-day existence with addiction. And no matter how much time you have, if you're not working on it at some point in the day, I usually do it first thing in the morning when I wake up. I ask, I do a little meditation to help me stay sober. If they're not working on a little bit each day, the relapse can come very quickly. And when they return home, they're not in their area where they're accountable. It can happen so fast. So we want to be accountable. We are here to help you with allowing your loved ones to return home for holidays. I don't want to keep anyone from their family on the holidays. It sucks. I understand that. But you want to understand the addiction is looking for any reason for that addict to pick up. And to go home and there's one argument with a family member, the addict uses that, and I have in the past, as an excuse to go get high and blame you for it. We don't want that. So boundaries around visitation, boundaries about holidays. It's huge, and it's one of the most important things I think we can do here.
Yeah, and one of the analogies that I've seen really resonate within the community, people outside addiction, is looking at it when a person first comes, and I'll even say 60 to 90 days or less, it's like they have the open wound now is scabbed. And so to them, they're thinking, oh, it's covered up, I'm good. But as we all know, even when it's scabbed, if we go out and start living life or playing rough, as soon as we get brushed up against that and the scab rips off, it's completely reopened. And so many times we have that false sense of security of, oh, it's scabbed, I'm okay, versus no, the wound is just starting to heal. This is actually the time where we need to really make sure we're protecting it, making sure it's clean and everything, so it'll continue to heal. So that's something that a lot of parents have said, I never saw it that way. I thought within 3 weeks they should be doing much better. They are, that's why there's a little bit of healing, but it's all surface.
Yeah.
The wound hasn't been able to come together and regenerate and heal. And that's where, 90 days to even a few months in sober living with that environment part where it continues to heal and then get some of that traction.